Hello, welcome to the Robert E. Howard channel. Today we're doing a special video on what's happening with the Robert E. Howard House and the newly created fund to cover the costs of repairing the house. We hope to explain the situation more to you. Joining us for the first time is Jeff Shanks, Foundation board member and the point man for us on the Howard House project. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks. Great to be here, John. Appreciate it.
And finally, making his long-awaited return, we have the shy and retiring Paul Herman, treasurer for the Robert E. Howard Foundation and head of the Robert E. Howard Foundation Press. Hopefully, we'll be able to get Paul to speak up. Howdy, Paul.
Somebody's got to be shy here. It might as well be me. So good to be back.
All right. Uh, we did a little video explaining what was going on initially with the house. Jeff, how did you get involved with the project of looking at the house?
So hang on one second. Sorry, my light died there. Wow. Okay, that's not what I intended. Um, so some of you probably may know me, from some of the podcasts I've done and from my comics essays and all that. I've been, a long time, Howard fan and Howard scholar. And my background is in archaeology. Some of you may remember that when I was with the National Park Service, led the dig behind the house. So that's sort of my area of expertise. This year at Howard Days, Arlene, who's the president of Project Pride, during Howard Days, she approached me and showed me some of the what appeared to be structural issues with the house, because she knew I was familiar with historic buildings and structures. And that's where I saw areas where the floor was starting to subside. She brought me around to the outside of the house where we could see the exterior of the house was starting to buckle in places, which was, obviously, very problematic. Um, so at that point, I obviously was very concerned. And it happens now, that I currently, I'm no longer with the National Park Service. I work for a large national architectural and engineering company, running their cultural resources program, their archaeology program. And I know we have structural engineers and we have an architectural historian that I work with very closely, Blair Knighting, on a number of projects. I'm an archaeologist. I'm a below ground guy. Blair is an above ground person, right? She does historic structures, and she's a former historic preservation officer for the city of Jacksonville, before she came to work for our company. So I reached out to her. I reached out to another structural engineer in the company and shared with them a number of photographs, of some of the issues we were seeing, and we decided we would put together a initial site visit and do a condition assessment of the house and get some sort of idea of what's happening here, because clearly it seemed like there were problems with the foundation, which certainly means it could be, very extensive, work that would need to be done. So, with assistance from the Robert E. Howard Foundation, we put together a project, and where Blair and I were able to visit the house a few weeks ago, and we got underneath. We went in the attic. We went underneath the house as well as we could. We couldn't get all the way under there because there wasn't enough room, but we used a fiber optic camera to look under the house. We pulled away the metal skirting that had been put around the outside of the foundation so that we could see under it. We pulled off some of the paneling in one of the back room where it appeared there was moisture damage, in the pantry behind the kitchen. So we got in as much as we could to try and diagnose what was going on without being too intrusive. We didn't want to do anything, destructive. We don't want to be pulling up floorboards or anything like that. But to try and get an idea of what we're looking at here, so that we can put together a condition assessment report that we can then use to look for contractors that have experience with historic structures like this, and with foundations that can do this type of work that needs to be done. So, if you want, I can give you a little idea of sort of what we found, what we saw. Would that be good?
Yeah, I think that would start letting
Sure.
people know
So,
exactly what's
yeah.
going on because I don't think that really came out. And the video, I
Yeah,
know I took some pictures of that outside western wall trying to show the bulge in the wall
right.
itself that's leaning out, and it just didn't come through. So,
Gotcha. So just let me start with what the house should look like, right? So the house was built in the early 1900s. The Howards moved in around 1919. It was probably built around 1911, give or take a year or two. And it was, probably what we would call a kit house. That in those days you could order plans and lumber and supplies to build a house from like Sears and Roebuck's and other catalogs like that. Um, it's a wooden frame structure, and but it would be supported not on a concrete slab like you often have with modern houses today, but on brick piers. A number of brick piers all around, were laid around, and the house is supported up on that. And you can see some of those brick piers are still visible in a few places. Those that was all covered up. That basically would have been open underneath, right? Um, when Project Pride acquired the house in the late 1980s, they put a metal skirt around the base and covered that up. That was commonly done to keep rodents out, that sort of thing. Um, but so we pulled that apart in a few places to get up under there to see what was going on. We suspected that the sill beams, which are long metal, or I'm sorry, long wooden beams that would be all literally, resting on those brick piers, and you have a series of them, across the house, the base of the house. We suspected that there might be some issues with those sill beams, that they may be rotted, and that's what's causing the foundation to sink. That's typical with houses, of this age, over 100 years old. Um, but when we got under there, we found out it wasn't necessarily the sill beams, although they do have some damage in some areas. The real problem was the brick piers that should have been there were no longer there in many areas under the house. And I got to see, like, when Blair, who's architectural historian, we were looking under there, and she looks back at me, and the look of horror on her face, I'm like, oh, this is not good. And I could see, as we're looking under there, it looks like the brick piers, they probably what happened is they deteriorated over time. The mortar in between the bricks is lime based, and it tends to erode away and dissolve away over time. And so that's probably what happened is the mortar eroded away on a number of these piers, and they started to fall apart. And they eventually they had to replace these piers as bricks started falling out. And so we're looking under there, and we're seeing, instead of piers, the house in some places is being supported by stacked up limestone rocks, paving stones that were wedged under there, pieces of wood, broken fragments of loose bricks that no longer have mortar that were just stuck back under there. So this is the problem. The house is no longer really being properly supported. It's you basically had decades of people replacing the brick piers that should be there with whatever they had handy, right? Which is, honestly, that's kind of typical in a, rural area like this in Texas. People that don't have a lot of money, to properly fix the house, you did what you had to do, right? To just keep supporting it and keeping it going. But at this point now, we're seeing that the house is starting to subside in a number of areas, and the big fear is that we could have a catastrophic collapse in one of these areas. To be honest, we're very lucky that hasn't already happened. It may be the only reason that it hasn't is that the house really doesn't have a whole lot of traffic. There's visitors that come, sporadically, but outside of Howard days, you don't have a whole lot of people coming through there and a lot of weight and things like that. So, fortunately, we've avoided a major collapse, but now that we're aware of this situation, we are seeing where the floor is starting to, sink down, and that's a problem. That means these makeshift foundations are starting to settle. And we're looking at the potential for, really major damage if we have a collapse. So that brings us to, where we're at. We need to, we're going to have to fix this. This is a pretty serious situation. There's other issues as well. The foundation is probably the most, most significant. But there's also, we found, when we started pulling away the panel in the pantry because there was obvious moisture damage, we started pulling away the panels and we found out that there was significant termite damage on top of the moisture damage. The moisture, there was probably moisture wicking up into the walls, which caused issues itself, but that moisture also attracts termites. And so termites came in and they badly eaten, that corner, that southwest corner of the house, at least the interior. So that's going to have to all be replaced. What's now the pantry and the bathroom, the floor there, it looks like, it was already, according to, talking to some of the Project Pride folks, when they acquired the house in the 80s, the floor was already in bad shape and they just replaced it with some plywood. So that's going to have to be redone as well. It's termite damage. It's significant. It is going to be a lot of work. So that is major as well. It's not as much of an imminent threat as the foundation problems, but it is also a big issue. We went up in the attic. For the most part, the attic was fairly stable. There were a couple of attic beams that were weak too, and maybe some dry rot issues that may have to be dealt with at some point. Um, but it's basically it's kind of problems that are not atypical for a house that's going on 130 years old almost. But it's the kind of thing that for most houses, you do a makeshift repair and that sort of thing, and you keep it going or whatever, and you patch it and move on, and that's kind of what's happened over the years. Um, with the Howard House, though, it's a little bit different, right? Because the house is on the National Register of Historic Places. It's also a Texas historic site. And one of the things that we don't want to do is make any alterations to the house that would jeopardize its National Historic Register status. That is a very significant thing. As someone who works in historic preservation and cultural resources, I can't emphasize enough that it's a huge deal to be on the National Register. And it's amazing, that is the case because there's a lot of, for example, H.P. Lovecraft's house in Providence, the 10 Barn Street house, is not on the National Register. It probably should be, but nobody's gone through that process. Ray Bradbury's bungalow out in L.A. was famously destroyed a few years ago. Was never put on the National Register. It never had any protection. We are very fortunate that the Robert E. Howard House has that level of national recognition. And significantly for us, it may make us eligible potentially for grants and things like that. That's something we can talk about later. But it also means that there's going to be some challenges when we do repairs to the house. We have to make sure that we do it up to the highest standards, to the Department of Interior's historic preservation standards. What that means effectively, it's not a bad thing. What it really means is that we need to try and do everything we can to restore the house and return it to its appearance during its period of historical significance. In other words, when Howard was there working and writing. So, that's what we're going to be looking to do. It will probably make some of the repairs more costly. We can't do this on the cheap. This is Robert E. Howard's house. This is where all of the stories that we all love so much were created. And we can't do this on the cheap. It's got to be done right. It's got to be done correctly. And with things like this, you don't get a second chance, right? We don't want to do anything that's going to damage the house or jeopardize its historic status. We want to fully repair the house the way it needs to be repaired, and also do it in a way to make sure that we're not having to go through this again in 20 years or 30 years or even 50 years, right? We want to repair it in a way that will be sustainable for the future, but will also maintain the historical and cultural integrity of when Howard lived and worked there.
If I could ask you, because I remember when you and Blair were looking exactly underneath the house, exactly where Robert E. Howard's room was. Could you explain what that is, what you found there? Because that's probably the most significant for all of us Howard fans as to what you saw there.
It was horrifying. I'm not gonna lie. We pulled out the skirting, we got up under there, and what's literally holding up the house in that area in Robert's room is a couple of vertical 1x4s. Let me be clear, 1x4s, not 2x4s, not 4x4s, 1x4s are holding that house up. I suspect that maybe because it was originally a porch, so that may be part of it. There's also, part of the room is being held up where would have been a normal brick pier. There's just some loose bricks stacked on top of each other, like Jenga, essentially, holding up Howard's room. So that was just terrifying. I can't imagine. I think of the times I've gone in that room, right, and sat at the desk to get a picture, and and realizing, wow, like we should not be going in there, not until this is fixed. In the kitchen, where we were seeing so much, there's the refrigerator in there that's so heavy. One of the first things I told Arlene when we got done is, listen, you got to move that refrigerator, like pronto. I mean, just even if you move it to the other side of the room, So, yeah, I guess I can't emphasize enough that we're lucky that nothing has happened so far. That it hasn't there hasn't already been a collapse. I think just us going in there, Paul, when Paul recovered the original desk and we were all moving the desk in there and doing all of those things. Thinking back now and seeing what was barely supporting that room, it just terrifies me, us going in there and moving furniture in there and stuff. So, you know, it's I don't want to sugarcoat it. Yeah, it's not good. And we're gonna have to to fix this. We really do, because we want people to be able to walk through the house, see the house, experience those things, see Howard's room. Maybe sometimes even get a chance to sit at the desk. We want that for fans. To have that experience, right? But we've got to do it in a way that preserves the integrity of this house.
Do you think the house, as it stands right now from your investigation, is it structurally safe for people to go in and tour the house right now? And, specifically depending on what's going on with Howard Days, would possibly nobody be allowed into Howard Days or only small groups of people at a
I,
time?
I think it would be why. Well, that's actually a really great question. I think if we kept it minimal, it's okay. I think that there are some areas that are very, very clearly, more dangerous than others. The whole side of the house along the kitchen wall.
Yeah,
We probably need to keep people out of that, off that side of the house as much as possible.
I would say
I think
rope off the
you know
kitchen from all the,
roping off the kitchen would probably be a good idea. But even in the dining room and the sitting room too, for those that are familiar with the house, all along that whole side, I think we need to stay away from that wall. We definitely need that refrigerator's got to get out of there. The stove, we need to get as much weight off of that part of the house as possible, because that's where we're seeing the most subsidence, right? Is all along that wall. I think that, yeah, we probably need to, maybe stay out of Howard's room this year. I know a lot of people like to jump in there and get a quick photo and stuff. We probably want to minimize that. And until I will say this. I mean, it didn't look, we're not seeing any evidence of subsidence there, but God, seeing that it's only held up by 1x4s, that's terrifying. Certainly we just need to be very careful and very cognizant, and, it's, you don't want to limit people, and if it's just Howard Days, and maybe we minimize, like we only have 10 people in at a time, and so you don't have huge crowds in there, it'll probably be fine. I think definitely keeping people out of the kitchen though. There's that big display cabinet in there. We probably want to, maybe rethink that at some point. Um, all of this is going to have to come out at any rate, because what we're talking about here, maybe this is what well, while, I'm not a contractor, right? And we're going to be reaching out to various contractors that have experience with this. We want to get multiple proposals and bids, before we, select a contractor. We want to make sure that we're not going to go with the cheapest bid. We're going to go with whoever knows what they're doing, has the best proposal, and is the best value. And we know that we're going to get what we need and that we're going to fix this house correctly and for the future. So, but I can tell you it's going to be extensive. We're going to have, when you're talking about foundation work on a house like this, it's going to require jacking the house up, at least in some form or fashion to get under there and reconstruct some sort of foundation that's going to be, sustainable. So it is going to be, we're going to have to probably get all the furniture out of there anyway, I would think. Um, so that's something to think about. And I don't know about timeframes too, right? This is, we can talk about some of the funding options. We're going to be trying to raise money. It's going to take time to raise money. We're going to look at some grant options. There are some possibilities out there, but grants alone will not be enough. And so all of these things will take time, which is why we're, getting the fundraising starting right now, right? We've got, Blair just actually just gave me her draft section of the report. I've got some things I'm going to add to it. I just got that, just started looking at that literally yesterday. So I'm going to go through that. I've got some photographs to add to it and everything. We'll have that final report here very shortly, probably in the next week. That'll kind of gives us sort of a starting document that we can then use to put together a scope of work that we can use to go out and get proposals from contractors. It will give us the information we need for background information to apply for grants, things like that. So we're going to have that shortly, but I know basically the gist of it, right? We're going to have to basically do a new foundation for the house. So it's going to be extensive. So I guess what I'm getting at is I don't know what Howard Days next year is going to look like, because it's going to depend on the time frame for some of this. Obviously we don't want to impact people's ability to visit the house at Howard Days next year if we can help it, or, we want to try and find a way to accommodate it. But that's definitely going to be conversations we're going to have with Project Pride once we have a better idea of the timeline.
And is this all you're expecting to be found with the house, or are you expecting there's probably going to be more damage found once they start getting in and looking at it?
Yeah. So that is one thing I'm worried about it, because we are seeing there are some areas in the center hallway that have some subsidence as well. So there may be more there. I mean, I suspect it's going to be the same thing. It's probably foundation issues, but there could be the possibility that there are sill beams too. The sill beams may need to be replaced as well. I was hoping we could get all the way under the house, but there was really not enough gap anywhere to physically get under there. So we couldn't see under the center of the house without pulling up floorboards, and we weren't going to do that. We didn't want to do any kind of destructive work, especially not to anything original to the house. We pulled off some of the modern, like 1970s paneling in that back room to find the termite damage, and pulled off the metal skirt around the house from the 80s. But, we didn't want to do anything at all that was going to damage any original material from the house. So we really couldn't get into what's going on under the center of the house. So I expect when they get under there, they're going to find some more problems. It will likely be the same kind of problems we're already seeing, right? It's foundation issues. So I would just expect that, that we're going to have the foundation done everywhere. Realizing, right now what I'm realizing for those that have visited the house, there's flower beds all around the house that are lined with bricks. Some of those bricks have the same maker's mark stamped on them as some of the bricks that we found when we excavated the storm cellar a number of years ago. So those are original bricks from the construction of the house that you can see now in the lining the flower beds. So I'm realizing those bricks lining the flower beds are the bricks that should be holding the house up. So, that is a problem. So we are missing these brick piers, in a number of locations. So that's probably the case in the center of the house as well as on the exterior where we can actually see what was going on. So the answer is yes. I think we will see more problems, but I suspect it will be the same problems that we're seeing around the perimeter as well.
Well, Paul, I think this is the most quiet you've been in the entire time I've known you.
That's because if anybody can outtalk Paul, it's probably it.
That's it.
Well, sir, why is the foundation involved with what's going on with the Robert E. Howard House?
Well, the entire point of the foundation is to support the legacy of Robert E. Howard. And this is one of the big parts. This is a big piece. Is his house. It's a place where people can come and gather. And we have Howard Days. It's a family reunion for all the people that come in to see this. It's a mecca that they can come to be with like-minded people and see the place where see the place where all this happened. Such a unique place. So of course we're going to be supportive of doing this. We've already placed. We covered the initial cost for the review that Jeff and his friend did. We paid for, we covered that because that needed to get done now to get things started. And we'll do that. And we'll see how much more we end up tossing in as we go along here. We know that we probably can't cover all of it, and we're pretty sure we can't cover all of it, and we have other things we do too, so we can't just throw everything at it. But we can certainly help out. And part of what we're doing, of course, is we're very well, we're relatively nimble online. We have good people that know on the team that know how to do those things, and so we're helping Project Pride out with the donations. We've set it up through PayPal and through Stripe that people that want to can go to the foundation page at rehfoundation.org, and there's a note on the front page, a link you can click for the donations, and it explains how it works, and you can donate to donate to this cause, and um, so we're trying to do our part too. So
And on the donations, uh, the foundation is a 501c3 tax deductible foundation. So people who give, uh, you itemize your donations on your tax returns. We will send you a receipt so that you could use that to help out on your taxes. Uh, why did we go with our own selves creating the foundation or I'm sorry, the fund instead of going through like say a GoFundMe or some other online place like that?
I think it's just easier for us to control what we're doing this way. We're Howard people. We're into control. So we take care of our stuff, and we want to make sure all the money comes in. None of it's going anywhere else. 100% of the proceeds of these donations, 100% of the proceeds is going to go straight to the coffers of Project Pride to help pay for this. We're just serving as the fee-free conduit, and are happy to do so.
Yeah. That for people who don't know, all of us on the board of directors for the foundation, none of us get paid. We're all doing this out of our love for Robert E. Howard and for Cross Plains. And as Paul just said, 100% of your donation will be going directly to Project Pride. Um, do we have any plans for, say, fundraising drives or uh,
Well, it
anything?
was interesting that once word leaked out about, there was going to be a lot of expense and we're going to need to start raising funds, people immediately started contacting us and saying, I want to give money. I want to give money now. So we went ahead and set up a donation page so that people can start donating money now. They don't have to wait. Um, but also at some point we'll probably do some odds and ends special things to help with the fundraising too. And we're having discussions about that and how that's going to work. And so but we're planning to we'll hopefully do a few things. And I don't want to commit to anything yet, but we're planning to hopefully do a few things to help with the fundraising as it goes along.
Okay. Um, and of course, if people have any questions about what's going on with the house or with the donation funds, they can always contact us at info@rehf.org and ask. And
Oh, yeah. And also we're gonna set up a status page over with the donation page so that people that just want to see where we're at and how we're doing, it'll be on there so people can kind of read up on when the next step occurred, where we're at in the process, and see those basic things for it because they're going to want to, you're donating money. I would think you'd want to see where it's going and how it's working. So, so
I
we'll,
was
we'll
going to
address
say,
that too.
looking at the donation page today, at the time just before we started recording this, we were almost at $4,000 in donation
Mhm.
for just over 2 days. So that's
Mhm.
very fantastic that people are so generous in giving that
Yeah.
for the house. Um, will we all, I'll throw this out to you two gentlemen. Will we also want to commit to doing video recordings like this, where whenever we have any new information on what's going on, we can do this so that people can stay tuned and find out through this, watching a video as we make it, as we're going through the process?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And like I said, we can also duplicate it and have it available over the website as well.
Okay. And um, do you have any sort of a timeline, Jeff, as to where we are in the process?
So we're wrapping up this report. I've already reached out to a colleague of mine at the Texas Historic Commission to get some recommendations on potential contractors. Got a couple of feelers out. We want to like I said, we want to find contractors that have experience with historic structures that understand the constraints that we're under with the house being on the register, and that know how to deal with historic structures that are on the National Register, and are familiar with the Department of Interior standards. So that'll be the next process, is identifying contractors. We'll put together a scope of work. It's going to have to be general because, like we said, we're going to probably have contractors come and visit the house themselves and get under there and see, right? But we will at least have a good general idea of the kind of work that's going to have to be done. We know what we're looking at now. We need a foundation specialist. The termite work, is a little bit, that's more kind of normal house repairs, and we can probably go with a local contractor for the termite side of things. But we also need to do this in the proper order. Like, we may need to take care of the foundation stuff first before we do the termite work, right? And so we're gonna have to, that's the kind of thing we'll need to figure out. But the key is going to be getting that will be the next phase, right? It is basically vetting and selecting a contractor. That will, and have a cost estimate for what we're looking at. It may have to be a range because, again, they may get under there and find things we weren't expecting, right? And that's going to be something we'll have to take into account. But once we have that, we'll have a target amount. We already are ballpark, thinking that we could be approaching six figures here, it potentially in costs. Well, once we select a contractor, we have a proposal and fee from them. We'll have a better idea of exactly what we're looking at as far as, the cost for this. That will help us to further tailor our fundraising efforts and how we need to do it. And also, give us some targets where we might be able to pursue some grants to help with this as well. So that'll be the next step. But I expect it's going to probably take most of the next year just to get all of our ducks in a row and make sure, because while this is an imminent issue, we don't want to rush it. We want to make sure this is done right. That's the key, right? Like I said, we don't want to, a lot of the makeshift repairs and the Band-Aids that have been slapped on the house over the years, that's a lot of the reason we're here now. So we don't want to repeat that, right? We want to make sure we get this right and do it well, So, I think we're going to be looking, at least it's going to be, probably several months even before we're ready to, to get into this, because it's going to take a while just to go through that process of selecting a contractor and doing all of that. Um, you know, if we end up having to go with grants, that also takes time too, if we're going to try to get some grants to supplement it, because because you have to apply for grants. They usually have a period and all of that. So, excuse me. So it's not going to be a fast process. It's probably going to take the rest, expect this to take, the bulk of the next year probably, to do all of this. But once it's done, the house should be solid. That's what we want. We want a solid foundation, literally and figuratively, right, for the Howard House.
And so the ultimate plan is to try and get it as close to how it looked during the 1919 to 1936, with the
Yes,
exception of we can't tear down the later addition of the room that's now the gift shop for the house.
right,
But
right. We can't do that. But things like like that metal skirt that was put on in the late 80s, right? That while well-meaning, and that's to keep rodents out and things like that. What that also did was it trapped moisture in there, right? Which made some of the original siding is now rotted away where that metal skirt was put around it, right? So a lot of the things that were done, over the years, additions and things have caused some of the problems. The benefit to taking the house back to the way it was as much as feasible, in a lot of ways, is that it will make the house, more durable. People knew how to build houses 100 years ago. They were built for a certain way. It was meant to have air flowing under it, right? And things like that, right? So the benefit of taking it back more to its original state is that it will actually help preserve the house too. And there's a lot of things we can do things that will be modern but still capture the feel of the original construction too. So but I'm kind of looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to the idea of bringing the house even closer back to its original state, when Howard was there, when he was writing and working. For now, let's we're gonna focus on the priority, which is making sure we don't have the house collapse on us,
yeah.
right?
Well,
First
you
things
have
first.
uh, you gentlemen have anything else you want to talk about?
Not tonight.
I mean, one thing I would like to do is thank all of the fans.
Mhm.
Like you said, already 2 days and we've already got $4,000 and it's barely even been shared. As word started getting out about this online, just the outpouring of concern and people wanting to do something, um, is, I mean, for those of us that, on the foundation that have been doing this for years and all of that, I mean, I love to see that. And I just want to, just share my appreciation for all of you fans out there. This is why we do it. We're not even fans. We're dog brothers and sword sisters, right? So this is an all hands on deck situation, and I love seeing, already people are there ready to do their part, and that's greatly appreciated.
And we do too, of course. Exactly the same sentiment. And we're here for the fans. That's the most. That's what we
Mhm.
do, and they're here to help. They're here to be not here. They're here for Howard, which is
Yep.
really nice.
Yeah. Well, then I guess that will go ahead and be the end of our video. And Paul, you don't talk enough, okay? So thank you folks for watching this video. Thank you gentlemen for coming on and doing this video. As we said, we'll probably do some more as we start getting more and more information as the process goes on. And thank you so very, very much for those of you that have contributed so far to the fund. And if you're thinking about it, please take a look at the video that we did initially from the initial assessment that Jeff and Blair did so that you can see what the house kind of looks like. And, you
Yep.
know, think about giving to Bob for all of the hours of enjoyment he's given to you with his writings and his characters. So thank you, and we will see you all again very soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.